Posiwid and what it means for the U.S. Constitution. What is Posiwid? Well, it's an acronym that means the purpose of the system is what it does. Stafford Beer came up with the term and stated there's no point in claiming that the purpose of a system is to do what it constantly fails to do. The idea of the acronym is to counter the notion that the purpose of a system can be read from the intentions of those who design, operate, or promote it. Now, I lean towards originalist intent in my interpretation of the Constitution. Now, this is not because I believe the Constitution as it was written is a near perfect form of government. It is actually because originalist arguments push governance in a direction that's most beneficial to myself and my worldview. Now, I've talked about the Constitution's flaws in earlier videos. Our hardcore originalists will tell us that all would be well if the Constitution were followed as written. The Constitution, however, is not the entirety of the government. And the government is not the entirety of the establishment which runs the country. I think if we look at traits of our government as it currently has, and see if those traits existed while the constitutional drafters were still alive, even if those traits are in muted form, will show us Posiwid in action. So, we know that budgets and deficit and debts have been an issue for us, especially, and we act as if deficit spending and debt are a horrendous aberration. Yes, the levels are horrible, but it's not an aberration. The U.S. has been debt-free 1 year of its entire history. Thank you to Mr. Andrew Jackson. Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers, how, I don't know, but he single-handedly and unconstitutionally created a central bank and centralized all government debt in order to bind states to the federal government. Most of the complaints against doing this came from the anti-federalists who were out of government and who had little to do with the writing of the Constitution. The Federalists had little to say and certainly couldn't muster any opposition to the institution or practice. We seem to be at war all the time, and Congress hasn't declared it. The U.S. has only declared war 5 times in history, from the signing of the Constitution until, from the signing of the Constitution until 1820, the United States engaged in 14 different military engagements. Only one of them, the War of 1812, had a declaration of war. Some of them had authorization by Congress. Even though this seems counter to the Constitution, the Supreme Court weighed in early in the early 1800s and made it so that a lack of a formal declaration is not a constitutional issue. Another issue we notice is that there seems to be this deep or permanent state that seems to run things contrary to the will of the people. I hate the terms deep state and permanent state because to me they're ignorant in nature. It presumes the rise of something that was always there. When a person's thoughts are in alignment with the establishment, well, then the government seems exactly like a college 101 civics class. When you have fundamental disagreements with the establishment, it seems like an unseen force is out there guiding things. It's always there. I think the biggest Posiwid of the Constitution is that there would be a national establishment in the first place that would have ultimate control of all policy. And this requires a little digression. Colonial government in America is, for the most part, an import of local governments from Britain. One quirk was something called the disinterested man. The British believed that only disinterested men should be in government. This meant money for somebody who was in government needed to be in a trust, or their source of money should be being that of being a landlord. In America, British America at that time, parking money in an investment firm was almost unobtainable, and landlording in the colonies was not easy to find or create income streams from. So, American colonists altered the disinterested man concept from a person not having to worry about their income stream, instead being that of a person who was born in the right family or having attended the right school. In other words, the right upbringing or education determined your fitness for government. The effect of this was to empower the coastal elites at the expense of those in the interior. Worse, the coastal elites never abandoned the trappings of being disinterested. They pretended they were just as disinterested as their English counterparts. However, they claimed knowing how a disinterested man should behave was sufficient to being able to act like one. In the lead up to the revolution, there would be 12 insurrections by the inland populations against the coastal elite. Virtually every colony had at least one. Some were still in progress as the revolution broke out. The American Revolution was only possible via a breakup of the establishment portions of the coastal establishment. The coastal establishment embraced the interested men of the interior, and these would be the ones who were pro-independence. So rather than they had been for years ignoring the interior, the coastal establishment broke up into three different segments, one of which allied with the interior. Now, by having a portion of the coastal elite and a large portion of the interior, this would end up providing the money, intellectual capital, and the manpower to push the British off the continent, and for the anti-independence portion of the establishment to win. This melding of the establishment disinteresteds to the vulgar interesteds of the interior would be codified in the Articles of Confederation. This highly effective coalition defeated the British Empire, began the process of paying international debts, and began working out age-old land disputes between the states. Although effective at local governance, the interested interior believed in confederation and had no interest in national governance. Our current Constitution is an overthrow of that order from the Articles of Confederation. The old coastal establishment, the ones who were for revolution, and those who were looking for union compromise, and those who opposed it, actual Tories, reformed after the Revolutionary War to create a new establishment, breaking from the interior vulgar interesteds that had helped with the revolution. Madison's primary goal was to centralize power around the disinterested men's, the ones from the right families and universities. This is where many people misread Madison when he states his goal was that there would be no political parties in the US. What he was saying was that he believed his Constitution would be so inclusive to the establishment that no one would feel compelled to organize against each other. The primary goal of the Constitution was the empowerment of the establishment, with the verbiage of the Constitution being a starting point for this guideline. Thus, we have a judicial system was promised as the weakest branch of government, and it ended up turning into the ultimate check on government. And this happened in the early 1800s via the Marshall Court. And this is while all the drafters of the Constitution are alive. Many of them are still in government, and all are pretty much in control of their reason. They allowed this to happen when they realized that the nationalist power structure was too weak in comparison with the states. So therefore, the judicial branch was allowed to become more powerful than it was written. We have a constitution with no provision for a standing army. Yet we have a standing army because it fits the goals of the establishment. We have an old school national system that works just as well for globalist agendas because that's what the establishment wants. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. And if you have questions, we can delve into them either in the comments or into other videos. So, Posiwid. The purpose of the system is what it does. This is a system designed to bring the will of the establishment to fruition. The system didn't change from 1800 to now. The establishment did. So, in the comments below, if you've heard of Posiwid before, how do you think it applies to the Constitution, the government, and the establishment? I hit a lot of different areas at high speed going through there because literally there's probably about 3 hours of material there. If you have questions on any of those, please ask them in the comments. If I can't answer them there, I may answer them in another video. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, please consider subscribing. And also, if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.